Welcome to the Friday Night Campfire Stories. My name is Rob and I will be your host for this evening. If you're new here, I'm a short story writer, and every single Friday, we experience one chapter from one of my short stories. Each of my short stories are 4 chapters long, meaning that the first Friday of every single month we start a brand new story. This just so happens to be the first Friday in December, so that means we are starting a brand new story today. And so, today we will be experiencing my story, Donum. Donum is my Christmas horror story that I wrote. I gotta say, it's probably the scariest one I've written so far, so I think you guys will really enjoy this one if you're into the horror genre. So, without further ado, enough talking, let's get into it. The reason why you guys are here. This is Donum. Donum, Chapter 1. The snow fell in soft, gentle flakes, coating the world in a pristine blanket of white. The pine trees that lined the long driveway stood tall and silent, their branches heavy with the weight of winter. Christmas lights twinkled along the roof of the large 2-story house, casting a warm glow against the deepening night. It was the kind of night that looked like a postcard, the perfect white Christmas. Inside the house, Ashley flitted between the kitchen and living room, making sure everything was just right. The scent of cinnamon and pine filled the air, mingling with the smell of freshly baked cookies that she had just pulled from the oven only minutes before. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows on the walls as Tom stacked more logs into the flames. "Emma, sweetheart, leave the ornaments alone," Ashley called as she passed the toddler, who had taken a particular interest in rearranging the lower branches of the Christmas tree. Emma giggled and toddled over to her father, who swooped her up in his arms with a smile. "They'll be here any minute," Tom said, glancing out the frosted window. "I bet the roads are slick." "I'm sure they're fine," Ashley replied, though there was a tightness to her voice. She smoothed her apron and busied herself with the last few preparations, but the anticipation hung in the air. It had been years since she had seen her sister, Emily. Life had pulled them in different directions, Ashley with a young family and Emily with her whirlwind romance to Theo, a man she barely knew. There was something unsettling about how quickly Emily had married him, but Ashley put those thoughts aside for the sake of the family. Christmas was a time for togetherness after all. The sound of tires crunching over the snow echoed up the driveway. Ashley's heart skipped a beat, and she moved towards the front door, pulling it open just as the headlights of Emily and Theo's car flickered to a stop. The cold air swept into the house, biting at her cheek, but she ignored it, stepping outside to wave. "Emily," Ashley called out with a smile, watching her sister emerge from a car, bundled in a thick coat and a scarf. Emily's dark hair was tucked in her knitted hat, and her breath curled at the air as she approached. "Ashley," Emily's voice was bright, but there was a hesitation in her step, a slight awkwardness that Ashley couldn't ignore. Theo followed close behind, his tall frame hunched slightly against the cold. He was quiet as usual, his eyes scanning the house before landing on Ashley with a nod. There was something about him that always felt distant, like he was never truly present, even when he was standing right in front of you. "Come inside, it's freezing out here," Ashley urged, stepping aside to let them in. As Emily and Theo crossed the threshold, the warmth of the house wrapped around them like a blanket, but the tension remained. Emily smiled at Emma, who peeked out from behind Tom's leg, wide-eyed at the new arrivals. "Merry Christmas," Tom said, his deep voice cutting through the quiet as he reached out to take their coats. "You two must have had a long drive." Emily gave a small smile. "Yeah, the roads were bad, but we made it." "Good," Ashley said, leading them towards the living room. "I've got hot cocoa and cookies ready, and dinner's almost done." The conversation was polite, but thin. The glow of Christmas lights reflected in Emily's eyes as she glanced around the house, her fingers nervously fidgeting with the edge of her sweater. Theo sat in silence. His gaze occasionally flickered on the Christmas tree, then to the fire, but he seemed far away, as if something weighed heavily on his mind. Ashley felt it too, a strange unease settling in her chest despite the festive surrounding. She shook it off, determined to make this a perfect Christmas Eve. After all, it had been so long since they were together, and she was certain the holiday spirit would warm things up as the night went on. "Let's just enjoy tonight," Ashley said to herself, smiling as she poured cocoa into the mugs. Outside, the snow continued to fall in a peaceful hush, blanketing the world in white. For now, everything seemed calm, but the night was only just beginning. The table was set with Ashley's best china, the soft glow of the candlelight flickering against the polished silverware. The roast turkey sat proudly in the center, surrounded by bowls of mashed potatoes, stuffing, and all the trimmings. But despite the holiday spread, the atmosphere around the table was far from warm. The clinking of cutlery on plates punctured the awkward silence as they all ate in stiff politeness, each attempt at conversation quickly fizzing out. Ashley's smile felt frozen in place as she watched Emily describe the latest developments in her life with Theo. Her sister's voice was light, almost too sweet, as she rattled off every highlight of their whirlwind marriage. "Oh, and you wouldn't believe it, Ashley," Emily said, leaning forward slightly, her eyes shining with a certain sharpness. "Theo just landed this amazing promotion at his firm. He's heading up their international accounts now, which means we'll be traveling quite a bit next year. First to Paris, then Rome, just one glamorous place after another. It's such a dream come true." Theo sat quietly next to her, his gaze downcast as he pushed a piece of turkey around his plate, looking as though he wished to disappear. Ashley forced a tight smile, nodding as she refilled her wine glass. "That sounds incredible. I'm sure you're both excited." Emily shrugged, her smile widening. "Oh, we are. I mean, not everyone gets these kind of opportunities, but that's the beauty of hard work and finding the right partner, you know? Everything just falls into place." Tom shifted his chair next to Ashley, his eyes narrowing slightly as he sensed a subtle barb in Emily's words. "Well, it's great to hear that things are going well for you two," he said, his voice level. "Ashley and I have been busy with Emma. She's grown up so fast, it's hard to keep up sometimes." Emily's eyes flicked to Emma, who sat in her high chair playing with her food. "Oh, of course. I can't even imagine how much work that must be. I mean, I guess when you're busy raising a toddler, you don't have much time to focus on other things." Ashley felt a sting at that comment, but she swallowed it down, keeping her expression neutral. "Emma keeps us on our toes, that's for sure, but I wouldn't trade it for anything." Emily let out a soft laugh, too forced to be genuine. "Oh, I'm sure. Motherhood is such a rewarding path. But honestly, Theo and I just aren't in that phase yet. We're still enjoying our freedom, doing what we want, when we want. It's hard to imagine being tied down like that." Tom clenched his throat, tension building in his shoulders. Different strokes for different folks, I guess. Ashley could feel the heat rising in her cheeks, but she kept her eyes on her plate, her appetite waning. Every word out of Emily's mouth felt like a subtle dig, a way to remind Ashley that she had chosen a different path, less glamorous life. It was always like this with Emily. Everything was a competition, a veiled attempt to make Ashley feel small. "And then there's the house," Emily continued, dabbing her mouth delicately with her napkin. "We're thinking of expanding next year. Maybe adding a guest wing? It's just getting a bit cramped with all the art we've been collecting from our trips. You know how it is. Once you start, you can't stop." "Right," Ashley murmured, gripping her wine glass tighter. Their own house, though warm and filled with love, suddenly felt too small, too modest in comparison to Emily's world of luxury and endless upgrades. There was a pause, and only sound in the room was the crackling of the fire and the occasional clatter of utensils on plates. The weight of unspoken resentment hung heavy in the air, thickening the tension between the two sisters. "So," Tom said, breaking the silence, "have you guys planned out your next big adventure?" Emily smiled again, her eyes gleaming as she took Theo's hand, giving a gentle squeeze. "Oh yes, we've got a few ideas in mind, but you know how it is. We don't want to rush into anything too quickly. Life is just so full of possibilities, isn't it?" Theo finally spoke, his voice low and quiet. "Yeah, full of possibilities." Ashley glanced at him, catching a brief flicker of something in his eye. Regret, maybe, or something darker? Whatever it was gone just as quickly as it had appeared. Theo went back to staring at his plate, saying nothing more. Ashley couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was off, not just with Theo, but the whole evening. The perfect holiday gathering she had envisioned was slipping through her fingers, and all she could do was plaster her best smile and try to get through the night without letting Emily's word get under her skin. Outside, the wind howled against the windows, and the snow continued to fall, piling up against the house in thick drifts. After dinner, the group moved to the living room, where the Christmas tree glowed warmly in the corner, its lights flickering against the shadow that danced off the walls. The fire crackled, casting a soft orange glow over the room, and Emma toddled around with her stuffed reindeer in her hands, oblivious to the tension between the adults. Ashley sat on the couch next to Tom, sipping her wine and doing her best to relax after the stilted dinner conversation. Emily, who had been sitting near the fire, stood up and clapped her hands together with a mischievous grin. "You know what we should do? Open one gift on Christmas Eve." Tom raised an eyebrow. "Isn't that against the rules? Thought Christmas morning was the big reveal." Emily shrugged playfully. "Come on, don't be such a Scrooge. It's tradition. Remember how Mom and Dad always let us pick one present out to open the night before? It made the anticipation so much fun." Her voice carried a note of nostalgia, though it did soften the competitive gleam in her eyes. Ashley exchanged a glance with Tom, a flicker of unease tugging at her thoughts. She wasn't in the mood for gifts. Not after Emily's relentless needling at dinner, but she couldn't afford to say no without coming off as a Grinch of the night. "I guess one gift wouldn't hurt," Ashley said quietly. "Exactly," Emily chimed in, her grin widening as she crossed to the tree and began picking through the neatly wrapped presents. "Let's see what we've got here." Emma clapped her hands in excitement as she watched her aunt. "Presents." Tom chuckled. All right, but just one, kiddo. Santa's still got a job to do tonight." Emily passed a small, carefully wrapped present to Emma, then handed one to Tom and Ashley. The room filled with the sound of rustling paper as everyone began unwrapping, revealing simple, thoughtful gifts: an elegant scarf for Ashley, a set of personalized tools for Tom, and a soft toy rabbit for Emma. Theo, who had been standing off to the side, seemed disinterested in the whole process, his gaze distant as he stared at the fire, but Emily's voice snapped him out of it. "And last but not least," she said, a twinkle in her eye as she pulled a large, heavy box from under the tree. "Here's one for Theo. This one wasn't here earlier when we first looked, was it?" Everyone paused, glancing at the unfamiliar box. It wrapped in dark red paper, tied with an intricate gold ribbon. The tag on it was old-fashioned, handwritten in an elegant script that looked almost too perfect. Theo's eyes narrowed as he stared at the box, his face paling slightly. I don't recognize that." "Well, someone does," Emily said, turning the tag towards the group so they could read the name. "It says, 'For Theo, from,'" she squinted, "Donum Diaboli?" The room fell into a sudden, heavy silence. Ashley's stomach twisted as she looked at the name. "Donum Diaboli," she repeated softly. "What does that mean?" Tom frowned, his expression hardening. "Sounds like a weird prank." Theo's face had gone completely ashen, his eyes fixed on the gift, as if it had suddenly sprouted fangs. "It's not a prank," he muttered under his breath, barely audible. "What do you mean it's not a prank?" Emily asked, her voice teasing, but her smile faltered as she noticed Theo's reaction. "Who's Donum Diaboli?" Theo didn't respond right away. His hand shook slightly as he reached out for the box, hesitating before pulling it onto his lap. The others watched him, an uneasy tension creeping into the air. "The name," Theo's voice was strained, barely more than a whisper. "It means the devil's gift." A cold chill swept through the room, despite the crackling fire. Ashley felt her heart skip a beat, her breath catching in her throat. "What are you talking about, Theo?" Theo didn't answer, his fingers tracing the intricate knot of the gold ribbon. His hands moved as if compelled by something outside of him, like the gift had a pull on him that he couldn't resist. Slowly, he began to untie the ribbon. "Theo," Tom warned, his voice steady with an edge of concern. "Maybe we shouldn't open that one?" But it was too late. Theo's ribbon fell away. The dark red wrapping crumbled as Theo carefully peeled it back. Inside was a small, blackened box, ancient, heavy-looking, with strange carved symbols covering the surface. The wood was worn and charred in places like it had been in a fire or something far worse. Ashley's skin prickled with unease as the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Even Emma, who had been playing happily with her new toy, suddenly grew quiet, her eyes wide, staring at the strange box in her uncle's hand. What is that?" Emily asked, her voice trembling for the first time that night. Theo's eyes locked onto the box, his breath shallow. It's something I never should have received." Ashley felt a wave of dread wash over her. "Theo, what is going on?" But before he could answer, the fire in the hearth sputtered, the flames dimming as it sucked out the light. The shadows in the room deepened, stretching unnaturally across the walls, as if something unseen was creeping closer. Then, from deep within the house, they all heard it, a low, guttural whisper, like a breath of wind, but more sinister, more alive. The hair on the back of Ashley's neck stood on an end. She glanced at Tom, whose face had gone rigid with tension. "What was that?" Tom asked, his voice tight. Theo's grip on the box tightened, his knuckles white. "It's here," he whispered, his voice trembling with fear. "It's come to collect." And as the wind howled outside, rattling the windows, the name on the box, Donum Diabole, hung in the air like a curse, a promise of something far darker waiting just beyond the veil of Christmas cheer. That is going to do it for today. I hope that you guys did enjoy. If you did, please click that like button, hit that subscribe button. We make videos 3 times a week. Every single Monday, we do an episode of Echoes of the Past where I look into the haunted history of some of the world's most haunted locations. Every single Wednesday, we do an episode of Far From Fiction, which is a true crime series. And then, of course, Friday, the namesake of the channel, what we did today, the Friday Night Campfire Stories, where next week we'll be getting into Chapter 2 of the story. So, that is all for today. Like I said, thank you for watching. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and as always, thank you for spending a little bit of your day here with me.